Well, hello, friends and family. Today's study will be about the next woman of the Bible. Her name is Sarai, and then later she was named to Sarah. Now, the first mention of Sarai, was in Genesis chapter 11, verse 31, and it tells that she was married to a man named Abram. The name Abram means exalted father. He had two brothers named Nahor and Haran. In chapter 12 of Genesis, the Lord told Abraham to leave the country he was in and go wherever the Lord sent him, that he would make him a great nation, and that he, Abram, would be a blessing. So Abram obeyed the Lord and departed south towards a land called Canaan. He took with him his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot and all the people, goods, and animals with them. In verses 5 through 9, this tribe of Abram traveled throughout Canaan, Shechem, and the plain of Moreh. The Lord appeared to Abram here and promised this land to Abram's seed. Abram built an altar on a mountain east of Bethel and called upon the Lord. Then they all continued south. Abram and his entourage headed south towards and into Egypt because there was famine in the land. When they got close to Egypt, Abram asked Sarai to tell them she was his sister. She was such a fair woman, Abram feared they would kill him in order to have Sarai. She was so attractive that the princes of Egypt urged Pharaoh to take her into his house, and he did. But Pharaoh did give Abram all kinds of animals and men and women servants. Then God sent great plagues on Pharaoh and his house because of Sarai. I don't know how Pharaoh found out, but he asked Abram, "Why did you say, 'She is my sister'? I might have taken her to be my own wife." "Take your wife and go your way." So Abram, being made even more wealthy by all the servants and animals given to him by Pharaoh, departed Egypt with Sarai and all that he possessed. By Genesis 13, Abram and Lot were both very wealthy in silver and gold, flocks and herds of various animals, and tents upon tents of people. There were so many that the land where they were was not able to bear them or feed them. Also, there were Canaanites and Perizzites, which were giants, in that land, so that they all were scrapping for food and for land to graze their animals. And I must say, it took a lot of food to feed those giants. Well, they began scrapping among themselves, so Abram said to Lot, "Look, we are brothers. Let's not fight between ourselves. You pick the lands to which you want to go, and I'll take mine in the other direction." Lot looked up, looked over everything, and decided to head east towards Sodom and Gomorrah. This was before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and was so well watered it looked like the garden of the Lord. While Abram was still in the land of Canaan, the Lord told Abram to look up northward, southward, eastward, and westward. "For all the land that you see," said the Lord, "I will give it to you and to your seed forever. Arise and walk through the land. I will make your seed as the dust of the earth, if it can be counted." So Abram moved on to the plain of Mamre in Hebron and built an altar to the Lord. Now, Abram was not just an old man wandering around the country in a bunch of tents. By this time, he was very rich. He had many servants, land, and animals, and he was a man's man. In chapter 14, it talks a battle of nations including giants and including the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah. Now, Sodom itself in Hebrew means burning, and Gomorrah in Hebrew means submersion. So I think if you look forward, and we'll probably eventually get to the teaching on Sodom and Gomorrah when we discuss Lot's wife, but it's kind of interesting knowing how that they were destroyed. Okay, now remember, Lot had chosen to head east and had settled in the plains close to Sodom and Gomorrah. So King Chedorlaomer had captured Lot because all these kings that had gotten together, it was almost like a world war, or the world as they knew it then. They had captured Sodom, and in the meanwhile they had captured Lot, Abram's nephew. When Abram learned that Chedorlaomer had taken his brother, he gathered his friends on the plain of Mamre, plus 318 of his own servants, armed them, and took care of business. Abram's army killed Chedorlaomer and the other kings with him, and recovered Lot, the women and the people, and all the goods that those kings had taken. The king of Sodom would have given Abram all the goods recovered, but Abram declined lest the king of Sodom would say, "I have made Abram rich." He wanted God to get the glory. Okay, in chapter 15 of Genesis, we see the second promise to Abram. God told Abram, "Your seed will come from your own bowels, so that if you can tell the number of the stars, that'll be the number of your seed." And it also stated at that time that Sarai, was still barren. Abram believed in the Lord, and it was counted to him for righteousness. And that's almost a direct quote there in verse 6. And then by verse 18, there's a prophecy of the sojourn in Egypt for 400 years, but that his seed would inherit all the lands of 10 nations. Well, we see and we feel by chapter 16 in Genesis that Sarai was feeling incomplete. She was barren, and barren women in that time and in that place were looked down upon. It's not just like in our day and time whenever women want to have a child and can't. Women were actually looked down upon if they could not get pregnant. So Sarah got this great idea in her mind for Abram to take her maidservant Hagar and lie with her and let Hagar maybe bear a child, like being a surrogate for Sarai. So Abram decided to take her up on it. Now, when Hagar had conceived, she looked down on Sarai. Well, Sarai, not remembering that she was the very one that came up with this big idea, blamed Abram. So Abram told her to do as she would to Hagar. And after Sarai dealt hard with Hagar, Hagar ran away out into the wilderness. And an angel found her by a fountain of water and told her to return to Sarai and submit herself to her mistress. He promised her, that's Hagar, that her seed would multiply exceedingly so that it could not be numbered. Okay, so now we have Abraham actually going to be the father of two different sets of nations. The angel told her to name the child Ishmael, which means God will hear, and he would be a wild man. His hand, or his strength and his power, would be against every man, and every man would be against him. And this was in the notes, in the Brown's Driver Biggs commentary or dictionary, meant Arabians. These would be the Arabian people. At this time, Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. Now in chapter 17, Abram was 99 years old, and the Lord came once again to promise that of Abraham, or Abram, which means exalted father, he would make the father of many nations. And he changed his name to Abraham, which means father of a multitude. He made the promise to thy seed and to thy seed after thee. And he gives Abraham the covenant of circumcision. At this time, God also changed Sarai's name to Sarah. Now, Sarai in Hebrew meant princess, and Sarah meant noble woman. And God said, I will bless her. She shall be a mother of nations and kings. Abraham fell on his face laughing, because at this time he was 99 and Sarah was 90. Abraham said, Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee, speaking with the Lord. And God said, Sarah shall bear a son, and you'll call him Isaac, which means he laughs. And I will establish an everlasting covenant with him and his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have blessed him. I will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes from him will make a great nation. But the covenant will be established with Isaac, which Sarah will bear this time next year. Now, by that time next year, she was going to be 100 years old. So Abraham was 99 years old, and Ishmael was 13 years old when Abraham circumcised himself, his son Ishmael, and all the males in and of his household. By chapter 18, here we see God setting up a great, wonderful miracle. Not long after the circumcision of Abraham and his whole household, Abraham was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day, and saw the Lord and 2 angels. He pressed them to stay with him while he had prepared food and comfort for them. So after they ate, they said to Abraham, Where is your wife, Sarah? And Abraham said, In the tent. And the Lord said, I will return to thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. So we can see here that the time of life basically was the time it takes a woman after she conceives to produce a child, which would be about 9 months later. Now Sarah was just inside the tent door, and she laughed to herself. She was over 90 and past the point where women have the bodily functions to conceive and bear children. And the Lord asked Abram, Why did Sarah laugh? Sarah was afraid and said, I didn't laugh. And the Lord said, Oh, but you did. And then the Lord left. So here is where the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot's wife are, but we'll get back to Lot's wife in another video. By chapter 20, Sarah must have still been quite a good-looking woman at 90 years old. Abraham and his family had moved on to a place called Gerar, and Abraham went to Abimelech, the king of Gerar, and told him that Sarah was his sister. So here again, Abraham is putting Sarah off as his sister for fear that the king of that land would kill him in order to take Sarah. And she must have been a wonderful looking woman, is all I can say. But the Lord appeared to Abimelech in a dream and told him, If you so much as touch Sarah, you're a dead man. So Abimelech took Sarah back to Abraham and asked, Why did you do this thing? Talking about, why did you tell me she was your sister? Why did you allow me to take her into my house? And Abraham said, I thought there was no fear of God in this place, and you would kill me to take my wife. But she is my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. So Abraham didn't really lie, he just didn't tell the whole truth. He didn't say, she is my half-sister. He said, she is my sister, but he didn't say, she is my wife. So King Abimelech gave Abraham sheep, oxen, men and women servants, and 1,000 pieces of silver. So Abraham prayed for Abimelech's household to be healed, for God had closed up all the wombs in Abimelech's household after he took Sarah in. Okay, Genesis chapter 21. So now, as the Lord had promised at the time appointed, Sarah had conceived and bare Abraham a son. Abraham was 100 and Sarah 91. At 8 days old, Abraham circumcised Isaac, and this time Sarah was laughing. But she was laughing in joy and knowing that other people were laughing and rejoicing with her. Then the same day that Isaac was weaned, Abraham made a great feast. Sarah saw Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, mocking. You see, even though Sarah had a child, Ishmael was the firstborn of Abraham. Sarah went straight to Abraham, demanding that he cast out the bondwoman and her son. Now this act seemed to me so selfish because it was Sarah herself who took Hagar to Abraham in order to raise up seed. Abraham was very wealthy, and there would have been enough for all. It grieved Abraham to think of casting away his son Ishmael, but the Lord told him to honor the demands of Sarah, because the promises would come through Isaac. God assured Abraham that Ishmael too would become a great nation. So Abraham gave Hagar bread and hung a bottle of water on her shoulder and sent them away. That also seemed really stingy to me, but maybe Abraham just took God at his word and believed he would supply whatever Hagar and Ishmael needed. Now by chapter 23 in Genesis, Sarah died at the age of 127. Now we've skipped over some things, and we'll get back to them as we go through other teachings, but today we're basically talking about Sarah. By the time that Sarah died, Isaac was about 36 years old. Abraham bought a burial place from Ephron the Hittite for 400 shekels of silver. Ephron wanted to give Abraham a burying place for Sarah, but Abraham wouldn't even have it and demanded Ephron name a price. I'm sure Abraham was thinking of the time when his days were finished, and he wanted to make sure of a place beside of Sarah to be buried. Then by Genesis chapter 25, Abraham was at the ripe old age of 175 years old. Abraham also died and was buried close to Sarah by his sons Isaac and Ishmael. So somewhere along in that long time frame, Isaac and Ishmael were together. They knew each other, and they come together, especially at this time, to bury their father Abraham. Abraham had actually lived long enough to marry another woman named Keturah, and he had some unnamed concubines. So from Sarah's story, we will be led then to our next woman of the Bible named Rebekah, and she would be Isaac's wife. And we also see how that through Abraham and the promise of the blessings that Abraham would be his seed, and himself would be a blessing to the whole entire earth. And that is where Messiah, Jesus, comes in. I hope you've enjoyed this message and learned a lot. As I study through it, and I've read it many times, I pick up additional things, additional details that I never quite saw before. Many blessings to you. Pray for me. I pray for you all. See you next time.